What we haven't yet talked about are, we've gone over the basic epithelial tissues, all 8 of them or something. We've gone over connective tissue proper. We focused on connective tissue proper. Does anyone remember how many there were? 3 in each. Yeah, so there's loose connective tissue and there's dense connective tissue. So a total of 6. There's three in each of those categories. So we've gone over 6 connective tissues. There's a lot more. We'll get to them later. So you know epithelial tissue is being more superficial, being really packed together. It's more protective. Connective tissue is in between that. It's deep to that. It holds things together. We're starting on slide. There's a lot of slides. Okay. 42, slide 42. We've talked about serous membranes. What's a serous membrane? Can someone tell me? What's a serous membrane? It lines cavities, yeah. Serous membranes line cavities to help minimize friction so they can slide around. So that's one type of membrane. You've heard of it already. That's a serous membrane. Did I mention cutaneous yet? Do you know what cutaneous is? If I just say the word cutaneous, where would you find that? Skin. Skin is a cutaneous membrane, or it has a cutaneous membrane. We'll talk about that. What other membranes have we mentioned? Oh, mucous membranes is another. So we've mentioned 3 already. There's one more type of membrane, and it's found lining some joints, or many of your joints. Anyone know what that is? If you don't know, it's no big deal. We haven't gone over it. Synovial. Anyways, there are 4 types of membranes. What a membrane is in this context, I'm not talking about plasma membranes. That's completely different. These type of membranes are sheets of epithelial cells and the underlying connective tissue. So when you have epithelium and connective tissue together, you form a membrane. So all 4 types, serous we're going over first, all 4 types of membranes are a combination of epithelial tissue and connective tissue. Epithelium on top, superficial, connective tissue deeper to that. So when we see serous membranes, what we have, it's those membranes that line lungs, peritoneal cavity in the heart, for example, the 3 that we've gone over. You have simple squamous epithelium on the apical side, the side facing the lumen. And you have areolar. Is that a loose or a dense tissue? It's a loose tissue, yeah. So you've got simple squamous, and then loose areolar deep to that. It's called serous membrane. We've gone over this word a lot. The word serous is referring to serum, and serum is a fluid that's very liquidy. So serous membranes produce a liquidy fluid. So on the apical side, you have your serous fluid. And remember, with serous membranes, it kind of doubles up on itself. Like if this is the heart here, it does that. And the fluid is all contained in here. What's the term for the membrane closest to the organ? Visceral, away from the organ? Parietal. So the fluid's in here, facing the fluid is the simple squamous, deep to that is the areolar. That's what serous membranes are made of and where they're found. Again, the function is to help reduce friction. Questions on serous membranes? Yes?
For example, the heart, does it not completely cover?
Does it not completely cover the heart or any other organ? I mean, I guess there has to be a point where it's not fully covered, but it would be more covered, like it would be like that. But it does. There has to be a point where it doesn't. Yeah. And often these membranes, like the heart has blood vessels going up, so it's not trying. It has to go around those blood vessels. So, yeah, there are, I guess, small entry points where you just need connective tissue to hold things together. Okay, so that's serous. Mucous membranes have mucus on them, but it's more than that. Let's use this color. Mucous membranes are the membranes that are lining most of your tracts. So the inside of your mouth and nose and esophagus and digestive tract and respiratory tract are mucous membranes. Your lining of your urinary tract and reproductive tracts are mucous membranes. So all the tracts are lined by mucous membranes. You have, let me back up. Because this is still technically the outside of your body, these mucous membranes, you need a barrier to pathogens. You need to moisten the surface. That's why we need to keep it wet. And mucus helps trap that moisture because it's a thick fluid on top. And it's also a support for blood vessels and nerves. There's no one epithelium for every single mucous membrane. So for serous membranes, it's always simple squamous. For mucous membranes, it just depends. Unfortunately, there's no simple way to remember this. It might be simple columnar in many parts of the bottom portions of the digestive tract, like the intestines or the uterus, for instance. That's simple columnar. So shown here is simple columnar. It could be pseudostratified columnar. Can anyone remember a major organ that has pseudostratified? That's transitional. Stomach is simple. Trachea. Esophagus is stratified. Or it could be stratified. Non-keratinized stratified squamous. So it just depends. So really you just have to memorize it by organ, and if it has a tract, then it's a mucous membrane. So it's variable. Variable type of epithelium. I'm just gonna, yeah, whatever. Variable type of epithelium, but deep to that, it's going to be areolar. Mucous membranes are meant to protect the deeper layers of your tracts. Keep it moist, protect it from pathogens, things like that. Questions on mucous membranes? Cutaneous. That's just a fancy word for the outer layers of your skin. Cutaneous. It makes up most of your skin, cutaneous membrane. We'll get into more detail of the difference between skin and cutaneous membrane. It's more accurate to say that the cutaneous membrane is a part of the skin than the skin is a part of the cutaneous membrane. The skin is a bigger thing. Cutaneous membrane is a part of that. I'll say that one more time. The cutaneous membrane is a part of the skin. So skin is thicker. One part of the skin is not. The cutaneous membrane is just a portion of the skin. What's characteristic of cutaneous membrane? It's thick, it's waterproofed. We've got our keratinized stratified squamous on top. The deeper layers, there's actually two different connective tissues. The layer just underneath, just deep to the epithelium, is areolar. And then deep to that which is actually much thicker, is dense, irregular. So it goes keratinized stratified squamous, a thin layer of areolar, a thick layer of dense irregular. All of that is cutaneous membrane. I guess I'll just mention this now. Does anyone remember what connective tissue is at the deepest part of the skin? Adipose, fat. So adipose would be down here. If this is the cutaneous membrane, what's the term for below it, deep to it? Subcutaneous. This is subcutaneous. Cutaneous, subcutaneous. So if you have a subcutaneous injection, you're injecting below the cutaneous membrane. You have to go deep enough to get to the fat. And that's shown here. Stratified squamous, areolar, all of this is dense irregular, and then here you can see the adipose. Yes? What's the dermis and what's the epidermis? We'll go over those terms later. But the dermis is where you find areolar and dense irregular. The dermis is where you find areolar and dense irregular. Epidermis is the stratified squamous. Yeah, is subcutaneous synonymous with hypodermis? It is. They mean it's exactly the same thing. Yeah. How far do they go when they give you a flu shot? Is flu shot intramuscular? I'm forgetting. I think it's intramuscular. So muscle is even deeper. Look up injection types. They're pretty cool. You can have hypodermis. You can have what am I trying to say? Intravenous is to the veins or blood vessel. Intramuscular is into the muscle. It's recommended to do it at different angles to make sure you get at the right depth. Okay. Last membrane type is the tattoos would go. If you have a tattoo, it'll go to the dermis. So the ink stays below the epidermis in the connective tissue layer. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So if you want a tattoo to stay, you don't want it just in the top layer. Those cells are constantly replacing. You want to get the ink in the deeper layers, but not too deep because that's too deep, and then you won't see the ink. Last type of membrane is synovial. This is found lining your joints, specifically the joints that are movable. So we'll get to that later, but most of the joints that you think of are movable, like your elbows, your knees, your neck, waist, everything. Those are lined with synovial membranes. So it's a lot like serous membranes in that you have a layer of membrane lining a cavity. This is the joint cavity. So let me draw. Here's one bone. Here's another bone. This region here is called the joint cavity. And that joint cavity is lined with synovial membrane, excuse me. And synovial membrane produces synovial fluid. So what's inside of that cavity is synovial fluid. So that's what's shown here. Here's the synovial membrane lining the cavity. The fluid is produced and released into here, into the cavity. The cells that are found here are also simple squamous. These cells here are simple squamous, but here's the major difference between synovial versus serous. With serous, all the cells are tight together. So there's no leaking of fluid. With synovial membranes, the cells are not all tight together. There are gaps, like huge gaps. I'm not talking about gap junctions, that's different. There's gaps in between cells. Because of those gaps, that allows an easier transfer of stuff from the interstitial fluid into the synovial fluid. It's all just one thing. There's no blood vessels here. Like, see this cartilage? This is cartilage at the end of your bone. There are no blood vessels here. So this synovial fluid is acting as a way to transfer nutrients and waste back and forth. Because of those gaps, there's no basal lamina. Or there's no basement membrane. There's no basement membrane. Deep to the epithelium, to the simple squamous, you also have areolar. Simple squamous, areolar. So you'll notice all of these membranes, they all have areolar in the deepest part, just deep to the epithelium. It's just with cutaneous, in addition to areolar, you've got dense irregular. Questions on membranes? Yes.
In regards to tattoos, so they say like on your fingers and stuff, tattoos don't last regardless. Is that because of that extra layer of skin?
Oh, why don't tattoos last like on the palm side? Yeah. We'll be. So the question is about tattoos and why they don't last on places like your hands. The type of skin that's on your hands and feet, like the plantar side, the bottom side, are different than the rest of your body. It's thick skin.
So that would be the reason.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Okay.
I'm not too versed in it, but that's my guess. We'll go over the differences between thick and thin skin coming up. Okay, so that wraps up our discussion of tissues. We finished talking about cells, the basics of cells, and the important molecules like lipids and proteins. We now know what tissues are, collections of cells that work together. Now that we know what tissues are, we're finally going to start talking about organs and organ systems, starting with the integumentary system. How you just start taking small things, putting them together in very specific arrangements to make them do more. So we'll see that the skin is made up of not just epithelium and not just connective tissue, but also other tissues. Take a second to answer this on your own, or you can talk to your group if you'd like. Yeah, take a second. I need to I think the lab over there ends at around 11, but I want you to try to set up as much as you can even before that. So right, so all the right, you have to put it. Treat this like it's a question on the quiz. No, this is something that could appear on the next quiz, maybe. So you should know this already. Here's Monday, Wednesday scantrons. These people are missing, except her. She just gave her. So you could take one out. Here's the setup. I just emailed you the link for the photos so you can see how I set it up.
I think you're mad. Sorry. I think I remember this last time.
Well, either way. And this is the far left. So one should be here, 5, 6. And so it gives you the approximate, like how much this means. No, that's just double check. Check your email and the photos. You might use. Like for example, the even if it's setting stuff up in the back room, in the cadaver room, please do that. Go through, red is cadaver room.
Can't forget that. Physiology.
This is, go through physiology.
Go through
Yeah,
physiology.
just Raymond James.
Gotcha. Okay.
Raise your hand 2 more time. Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds. Talking over, how does the structure of these cells relate to their function? How do the structure of these cells relate to their function?
I don't know if you know. So I'm just speaking. Yeah, this is during
So neat.
I thought it was Bill.
Yeah, All right. Let's take a stab at this. How would we answer this question? Let's start with the adipose cell. Who can give me a description of the structure and its function? Casey. So nucleus, organelles are pushed to the side. I'm just shorthanding this. The consequence of this is it gives more room, more space for lipid storage. Great. The whole function of an adipocyte is to store lipids. And that is maximized because we have the nucleus and organelles all pushed to the side. Great. That'd be a nice answer if this were on a quiz. Who can answer this other one about our fibroblast here? Sorry?
Builder.
It's a builder. Go on. What are we building? Fibers in general, not necessarily just reticular fibers. Yeah, fibroblasts are the builders of connective tissue. We're building fibers. Where are the fibers going? To the what? They eventually mature into fibrocytes, yes, but once the fibers are made, where do the fibers go? Do they stay in the cell? No. They go to the, what's the outside here called? It is the interstitial fluid, but there's a term for connective tissue that's only for connective tissue about the stuff that we create out here. Once the fibers are made and they're put out here, it becomes the what? Extracellular matrix. Okay. The function of fibroblasts is to create fibers for extracellular matrix. That's its function. We didn't describe its structure though. How does its structure relate to its function? What's the advantage of these things? It's extending. Go on, complete the sentence. Connect the two. By extending, why is that advantageous? We're not quite communicating. I know neurons are branched also for the purpose of communication, but how do branches here help with? How would you describe a matrix? What is the word reticular? You described reticular. You don't know what reticular means? Like a mesh network, yeah. Our fibroblasts have branched processes, branched structures, so that we can create a network of fibers. By having these branches, it's easier to create a network. We can send fibers in different directions all around it. Reticular means network. Yes. Last part. I'll just read everything. Adipocytes, the way they're shaped, they're big and round, and the nucleus and organelles are pushed off to the side. Because nucleus and organelles are pushed off to the side, that gives more space for lipid storage, structure to function. Fibroblasts are branched. They have branched processes, branched points of the cell. By being branched, when they create fibers, protein fibers, and they send them to the extracellular matrix, you're creating a network of fibers, sending it all over the place and not just to one part.
And those that we found like in blood vessels or.
Where do you find fibroblasts? You know, fibroblasts, where do you find them? They're just kind of interspersed everywhere in that connective tissue area. So like say we're talking about areolar or dense irregular, they're just here's one, here's one, here's one. They're just all over the place. You remember mesenchyme? Remember the mesenchyme, the embryonic connective tissue? Slide 35. It's just a sea of cells with branched processes that will eventually become fibroblasts and create extracellular matrix. Just spread out more than epithelial tissue. These are good questions. Anything else I can clarify? Cool. We're going to move on then. You could go to your chapter 5 notes. Didn't get it?
That's freaking.
Just give me any extras. Any extras? Just enough? Cool. Okay. So we're talking about our first system. We've talked about cells, we've talked about tissues. Systems are a composition of all of those things. I know we just went over cutaneous membranes, and cutaneous membranes we're only talking about the epithelium and connective tissue, but it's more than that. There are blood vessels in the connective tissue. So there's blood, there's muscle interspersed, and there's muscle deep to this. There's nerve endings running through here. So when we talk about organs and organ systems, it's a combination of all the tissues. The integument, when you think of integument, what do you think of? Skin. And what's the purpose of skin? Protection. Generally, the purpose of skin is protection. So we'll learn about all the layers and the cells involved of how they help with protection, how the connective tissue deeper to it help attach the epithelium, because we don't want our skin to fall off. That'd be bad. There are lots of different glands, like sweat glands. We talked about couple of different glands in the skin. Hair and nails are part of the integument. They're an extension of the skin. They're part of it. And hopefully we'll have time to talk about skin conditions. We'll see if we get to that. In lab, of course, we'll look at skin on our cadaver, and we'll also look at histology. And we have some skin models as well. So our skin is really important. Otherwise, you'd be exposed to a lot of weird things. This is a model of skin that we have in our lab, or something like it. So this is the superficial side. This is the deeper side. And you can see here that skin is really complex. It's not just epithelium and connective tissue. There's a lot here. By the time we're done talking about this chapter, you'll be able to identify everything you see here. Yeah, I know. So we'll get back to this. But I just want you to know, by the time we're done with this chapter, you'll be able to recognize everything in this model. Yeah. All right. Talk about the skin. So the skin is the largest organ. It is an organ. It's made of living tissue. Helps do things in your body. It's continuous with your mucous membrane. Remember my donut example? If you trace from the outside to the inside, it's all just one thing. So that's why your mucous membranes are technically the outside of your body. But if it's a tract, it's a mucous membrane. That's out here. That's cutaneous. Right. So it's composed of cutaneous membrane. It has glands, exocrine glands, stuff secreting to the outside, hair, and nails. All right. 4 basic functions of skin. Your skin can absorb some things. It helps regulate what can go in and what can go out. Our skin secretes stuff. So this is absorption. It can secrete stuff. We've got a bunch of glands in our skin, several types of glands. Hopefully you remember some of them, to help protect our skin in several ways. We can sense things with our skin. There are a lot of nerve endings and special receptors to detect different types of touch, whether it's a light touch or hard touch, pressure, pain, itch, temperature. We need different receptors to detect those different things. And a 4th function that you probably don't think about very much is contraction. Maybe the only type of contraction that comes to mind immediately or when you get goosebumps. So there are muscles found in skin, whether it's for contracting your hair to help move your hair and cause goosebumps, or even just to squeeze glands and squeeze things out to your skin. So 4 basic functions of skin. We will look at all of these things. Okay. Our superficial layer is the epidermis. Epidermis is stratified squamous, and I should be even more specific than that. What kind of stratified squamous is it? Yeah, it's keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. The top layers are the most flaky, and they're the flattest. As you go deeper, the cells get a bit bigger, so they start to look cuboidal. They're still considered stratified squamous, but they look thicker because they haven't dried out yet. So let's say this is the basal layer. All right. So all of this is known as epidermis. That's your epidermis. What is here's skin. Where's the end of the epidermis? What do you say? It's A, B, or C? B, right here. This is the border between epidermis and deeper stuff. You can see how thick or how dense the coloration is here because epithelial tissue shows cellularity. So the stratified squamous ends here, follows this wavy line. It's avascular, no blood vessels. Stratified squamous, keratinized, the top layer flakes off. So it's really dry and flaky up here. Cool, okay. It's epidermis. Yeah.
So if the top layer of your skin is dead when you put lotion on, are you just like hydrating dead skin?
Yeah, the question is if the top layer of your skin is dead, if your superficial layer is dead, when you put lotion on, are you just hydrating dead skin? Mostly yes. When you put on things like lotion, the general idea is that this lotion should penetrate a little bit into the deeper layers of skin. So this is dead, these are living though. So you want to get that lotion to penetrate a little deeper. which is also why it's recommended that you put on lotion after you shower, after you clean yourself. Because if you haven't showered or haven't cleaned yourself, you've got dead skin, you've got oils, and you're just putting on top of that. So that's a general recommendation. After showers, you put on lotion.
Well, it doesn't help like exfoliate first.
Does it help to exfoliate first? Yes. At least anecdotally, yes.
So, that skin can also absorb the lotion.
Can dead skin absorb lotion? To an extent, not very well, because it's mostly dried out and it's dead, dried out material. It can't absorb much. Living cells with cytosol can absorb things better. Any other questions? I'm not like the healthcare skin expert, but I'm trying to answer these the best I can. But in general, yeah, I mean, exfoliation, that's where you take off the dead cells. That's good to an extent. You don't want to go too deep. You don't want to damage cells that are alive, just the ones that are dead. Okay, still talking about the epidermis. There's two different types of skin that we can have relating to the epidermis. We can have thin skin and we can have thick skin. And I don't mean like you have thick skin because you can, handle people's comments. I mean, it's literally thick. It has many layers. Thick skin has 5 layers. Let me name them for you. The term for layer is stratum. The Latin term for layer is stratum, plural strata. The most superficial layer is called stratum corneum. We'll go over why they're called these things coming up. Stratum corneum. The next very thin layer is called stratum lucidum. The next layer after that is granulosum. Next layer after that is spinosum. And the very base layer is called basale. Stratum corneum, stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, stratum basale. 5 layers. We'll get to why they're called this and what they're made of in a second. But they're only found in the thick skin is only found in these areas. When I say anterior digital, what does that mean? Fingertips. Fingertips. Palm. Plantar calcaneal. Bottom of the foot. That's what that means, yeah.
Is the extra skin layer the reason that your hands and your feet don't have hair?
Is the extra skin layer the reason why your hands and feet don't have hair? You hinted at something that I was hinting at here. So good, yes, these areas do not have hair. Thick skin does not have hair. It has to do with that. The extra layer and just the extra thickness prevents hair from growing.
Another question.
Yeah.
What are calluses?
What are calluses? We're going to talk about stratum corneum. It comes from that. Calluses are a response to, when do you get calluses? When lots of friction. Whenever you have lots of friction, use that area a lot, it's your body's response to protect that area, so you make more. So you have increased what process? They are keratinized, but how do you get more cells in the first place? Mitosis. Would that be the same with warts? Ah, gosh, what are warts? Warts can be viral, but it's almost like it's not like cancer, but kind of is in that it increases cell production and also fluid production. I don't understand warts too well, but it has to do with that. It is viral. It can be viral at least.
You can transfer.
Right. It can be transferred. So thick skin, 5 layers, no hair. There's no hair in these areas. Thin skin has 4 layers. The one that it does not have is stratum lucidum. It has the others, corneum, granulosum, spinosum, basale. And it's found everywhere else except not your palms, not the bottoms of your feet. So this is the same magnification. We're at 240 total magnification. You can see how physically thin skin is thinner than thick skin. We need thick skin in areas that have high contact to help protect us. What layer is also massively bigger in thick skin? Stratum corneum, which is the most deep or superficial? It's the most superficial layer. And again, hopefully that makes sense. For in high friction areas, we need a thick stratum corneum. This is the dead layer. This is the expendable layer. This is what expands more if you have a callus. Yeah. We'll get to that. What are the functions of each layer? We'll get to that. Probably next time or in lab. Yeah.
Which one did you say was not thin skin?
What's not in thin skin? Lucidum.
Okay.
And thick skin has a much bigger corneum. Okay, I'm sure you're all eager to get to the practical or get to studying more. So yeah, I'll see you there. We're probably not going to be set up right away, but